Hello, all, and welcome to another episode of the Market Pulse presented by Smart Touch. I am your host, Aaron Fichera, and today I have a fantastic guest with us, Mollie Carmichael, principal of Zonda. Mollie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Aaron. Happy to be here.
Well, we got a really action-packed one. For context, we are on the heels of a highly contested election in which President Trump, is now our elected president, which will change the outlook for housing and building in general. But we will address that later in the show. As always, I love to start off our program and getting a little bit, Mollie, about yourself. Your path to becoming principal of Zonda is amazing. And for those that are unfamiliar with it, I'd love to share it. So where did it all begin?
Sure. It's a lot of this was luck, mentors that were just great in my life, and quite frankly, very young in my career, fell in love with home building and development. So, long story short, going to college, I started working for the Irvine Company at a very young age, and had great, some of the smartest people, I think, not even just in the country, but maybe in the world, that I had the fortunate opportunity to work with. And then I moved over to the home building side, frankly, wanting to be a better developer. I thought I'd be a builder for a couple of years, and then I fell in love with that. And then that same developer came back and recruited me back to the development side. So I did that for a little bit and then went back to the home building side. And then 2006 hit, and I really wanted to understand what was going on with Wall Street, these financial institutions, and a terrific, smart person at that time invited me over to the advisory side. And I've been on the advisory side now for about 17, 18 years. So I worked with John Burns at John Burns Real Estate Consulting for about 10 years, and I've been here at Zonda for about 8. And I work all over the country. I'm just, again, fortunate to work with super smart people. And I would tell you just about everybody I've worked with in my career, even at the very beginning, I still work with today. So it's such an interesting business. I feel like I get paid to do my hobby, and I'm still doing it today.
I feel the same way. How do you feel Zonda differentiates itself? You've worked across all these different entities and experiences, builder, developer, advisory. What ultimately drew you to Zonda, and kind of what's been their feather in the cap?
It's a good question. I would tell you that the start, it was Myers Research, Jeff Myers, who's another fantastically smart guy, very into technology. And he's always been sort of a leader in technology and data combined together. He created at the time, it was an app that housed all this different data. But what I really felt like coming over to Zonda is that he was at the forefront of getting to fast answers with big data sets, right? So I would say since then, there have been several acquisitions, several mergers amongst multiple companies. And I would say we're the leading provider in all things real estate, investment, data, advisory services, technology. We do everything from, building product manufacturing, all residential data, you name it, anything associated with that, like supply, competitive stuff down to the lot level, multifamily, single family for rent. We do tons of live events throughout the country, which I love being a part of. Again, from multifamily to single family residential. We do a really cool event called Future Place on master plans, sort of how to design communities of the future, and bringing great leaders from all over. We also have Builder Online, which so many people use that as just a resource. It's kind of a pulse of what's going on in the market every day. We have over 60 advisors like myself working throughout the country. My background tends to be more specialized in the master plan world and product segmentation, customer research. I really, really, truly believe, I don't know how you make decisions without asking people what they want first, and frankly, how they prioritize paying for that. And then the most recent thing that we've done and I am loving that. So we have a huge virtual group. I mean, I not only do a lot of reporting throughout the country, but I can now help a lot of my builders and developer clients plan 3D. So we'll design, a vision for the community, test it virtually. We can really fine tune the details where mistakes just don't get made because you can see everything before it gets built. That's super great. And then last but not least, we also have a listings resource, largest in North America, between livable and new home source. So just a huge plethora of stuff. Sometimes it's overwhelming, but anything you need to sort of make a good decision with. I love being able to have that hands-on resource in almost every one of those categories to get to the right answers. So I'm a bit of a data junkie, but I also feel like I can see three-dimensionally with strategy and data and all those things. And so having a lot of that at my fingertips really helps. So that was a long answer to a short question, Aaron.
No. Well, that's the beauty of it. We're each one of those parts we're going to look to dissect a little bit through each one. And yeah, I mean, some of the products that you guys, one first, hearing you speak, I've heard you speak at IBS and other shows, and you do a fantastic job. And
Thank
having
you.
some of your other counterparts like Livable and what you guys are growing through acquisition, mergers, new technologies that you're coming out. It always seems like there's something new. We had Lloyd Vaughn
True.
on early, Livable, and what you guys are doing and really changing the whole game there. It's very timely. So um, I I appreciate having the data junkie yourself on here so we can dive into it.
Yeah, Lloyd's terrific. He's really great.
Well, for those that are listening, to kind of give you a broad, you know, what we'll look to do is talk a little bit about the current housing outlook. What have we been experiencing? We're here wrapping up 2024, going into 2025, identifying which markets are overperforming versus underperforming. Are there any trends that are impacting builders and developers as well as new technologies? I know 3D, ways for more interactiveness, not only on the investor side and how to really work through the data, but also buyer behavior, as well as just future outlook. We have a shifting views when it comes to
For sure.
tariffs, regulations, interest rate cuts. I know we're coming on the heels of a 25 basis point interest rate cuts. What does that mean going forward for 2025 and that outlook? So buckle up, uh, grab some coffee or wherever time of day it is, because we got ourselves a discussion. So,
It's such an interesting market right now. If you look 4 years ago, post COVID, as we were coming out of Trump's administration and coming into the new administration, I think everybody was pretty grim and thought it was going to be a tough 4 years. We spent a lot of money. We went through $5 trillion, and there was a lot to catch up with. We lost horrific employment, and the stock market felt like it was at an all-time high, and nobody could explain that. Housing market was terrific. Nobody could explain that, given COVID. And yet we have had a substantially positive 4 years, and a lot of us could argue that. It's hard for me to argue just looking at the housing market. We have a stock market that now is ridiculously high. We have housing prices that are ridiculously high, despite the fact that interest rates more than doubled over that time frame. We have inflation that's extremely high. We have exceptionally high GDP and stable and strong. And I suspect, looking forward, we're going to have an interesting 4 years ahead of us. We have had strong employment. We still expect that unemployment's going to stay under 5%. Employment's, we're projecting, and so is every other major economist out there, that employment's really going to tail off over the next couple of years. So I think it's slowing, but we do again expect unemployment to stay in that sort of under 5%. It's very strong. I think our big challenges as we look forward are going to be a debt. I mean, I've been talking about debt for at least a couple of years now. If you start to look at, key markers, even office debt, all of
mhm.
the loans out there on big office. But the big ones for consumers today, credit card delinquencies are up, auto loan delinquencies are up. Mortgage defaults are trending up a little bit, but nothing that I'm worried about for sure. Especially because 80% of consumers out there have a interest rate under 5%.
Hmm.
So, but it's the new loans that are happening and some of those things I think that are a big challenge. We have overall from a market perspective, and I tend to talk more about the housing market, so I'll hit that just for some for some view here. Home sales are down in the resale market, not because there isn't demand there, but because there's all these people sitting out there with 3% interest rates, right? Me being one of them.
Yeah,
And so
that
that,
lock-in effect.
yeah, so it's really stalled. And as you know, we need people to move to then buy homes. But yet the new home market really is kind of serving the bulk of what new demand is out there. And
Mhm.
in the new home market, they're able to do buy down. So when you look at interest rates today and you look at the peak of where rates went to, I think it was November of 22, rates were just at about 8%. Now, remember, you go back to, I think it was September of 19, we were at roughly what? I'm sorry, it was September of 21. We were at 2.92%, right? So we really catapulted interest rates, and that changed purchasing power by about 43%
Mhm.
in home price, like real home price. So the new home market really can go in, as most of the builders have, and they're offering rates anywhere from, I think the last one I saw was 2.9%. I've seen 3.9%. I've seen 4.9%. It just depends on where rates are fluctuating. So rates kind of have the housing market in the palm of their hands, and we're projecting that rates are going to go down next year, but nothing extraordinary. I mean, our
Mhm.
forecast, I think it's 5.9% today, pretty in line with Wells Fargo and NHB and some of those folks. But I'm also hearing some economists go so far as to say rates could push below 4%.
Really?
All bets are off in that category. We have extremely low supply, not just in the resale market, but in the new home market. Yeah, we have builders really pushing for growth.
Mhm.
Um, the other big thing I think we have to worry about, or at least consider, so we've had all of this growth going into fringe locations. So, before it was all the primary markets where demand was great. But we had all this push to the fringe markets because we had so many people working at home and really employers supporting that had negative implications to the office market, of course. But the reality is now we're starting to see, I mean, Amazon really caused a big, um, a lot of commotion out there because now employers are saying, should we bring everyone back?
Yeah.
Many employers never had everybody working at home, but now I think employers are starting to question, should I bring them back? Facebook's brought, employees back. Certainly Google and some of the other campuses out there. So, I suspect, and if I look at the numbers today, we do quite a bit of consumer research. We still have anywhere from 10 to 30% of consumers that go to work full time that are in the new home market. Still quite a few people working at home, but if everybody gets pulled back to the office, we're going to start to see some shifts in those fringe locations, that have really been thriving, for quite
Yeah.
some, and quite frankly, I think fueling the market too, right? So I think that's positive. Everything out there right now in the new home world has an incentive tied to it. Overall, I would say, you know,
Well, let me ask you about those incentives because debt,
yeah,
a
sure.
huge driver, not on the national, but also on a personal pocketbook. Do you feel that having that debt and those incentives, is that more geared towards a certain demographic where maybe those that have a higher debt would be the lower first-time home buyers, and there's a bit of hesitation or a gravitation towards new build because of these incentives to offset?
Jacqueline Gibson. Sorry about that. Long story short, it's a great question. The answer is sure. If you have high equity, which a lot of the move down buyers have tremendous equity right now. Let me turn this up.
Uh,
Um, And that's fueling a big part of the market. Quite frankly, I think without the equity we had in the market, I think we could be at a standstill in some of these markets. But equity is driving so much of those higher price locations. The incentives, I think, are just offsetting what happened in the interest rate market, and I think it's why the new home market is still thriving. We've seen prices increase in some markets as high as 45% since 2019. And interest rates really drove prices artificially up by driving them so far down. And so now we're sort of climbing out of that at a whopping, I think today we're at about 6.7% interest rates. Now I remember just high-fiving my husband over 10% and then being excited about 8%. And 6% was a dream. And so it's not that rates are high. It's just we have shifted prices to actually support the pricing that we're at today. And now we have to really kind of climb out of, the situation we put ourselves in because of these very low interest rates. And so I think incentives are crucial or we're going to see substantial price declines. And
Yes.
the 43% price adjustment never really happened in the new home market like it should have because builders just bought down the rates. And so they sort of made that interest rate change invisible. So yes, I think we definitely need incentives today, but it is far more forgiving in the markets where you have high down payments. But I would tell you, even in the active adult market, they're less likely to put all their cash down with money as cheap as it is right now.
Well, and that's what's going to be the flip side as we talk about maybe a younger buyer, but also, I was reading a study that this year the average or the median age of the home buyer is 56. So do we still feel that this 2025 is going to be heavily geared, or the demand and buying power is going to be heavily driven by active adult, older or wealthier individuals?
Well, the reason the average age today is 56 is because the first time buyer, entry level buyer, is non existent. There is one, we've done a poor job of providing homes in those more affordable price points, right? So when you look at the product that's out there, two, they just simply can't afford to get in, right? And so it's really brutal out there. And so I think we need a correction in strategy. I do think we're going to see some correction in the market at some point. We have to. We've been riding this wave up for quite some time. But I guess if we want to continue to throw out trillions into the market, and this new administration's been known for that, maybe not. Maybe we just play the inflation game. We'll see.
If you had a magic wand, how would you approach it?
It's really interesting. It's not going to be a popular answer,
I don't know.
but I'm a
Sometimes it's
big
never.
fan of when you have debt, you pay it. Um, I'm a big fan
Wow.
when you make mistakes, you correct it.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of when things go wrong, you make them right.
Uh-huh.
And so it may sound very old fashioned, but it certainly works. So I think you have to, at some point, begin to. I think the administration that we've been working with, as much as they haven't been as popular, because they're not real time money in your pocket. But I think they were trying to reverse what happened. And I think you have to, at some point, inflation was paying back. Inflation was trying to get the market, in a place where it could be healthy again.
Yeah.
I think we have to see more inflation because of all the money we fueled the markets with. Um, and so at some point, yeah, I mean, I think you have to let the market correct itself. Even when you go back to the Lehman fallout and some of the things that happened then, we bailed out a lot of banks, and that was a hard correction. And, as you look at that, I think there's a lot of questions as to whether, the full correction could have given us a healthier market in the end. And I sort of asked my same that same question during COVID. Do I think there should have been some relief? Absolutely. Do I think all the things that happened during the prior administration, and as long as we had doors closed and all the decisions that were made, it's easy to second guess it, right? So I don't
Yeah.
mean to be critical per se, but I think
But printing a third of the money supply in a 4-year time frame, there's
right,
got to be a day of reckoning.
for sure. And it's kind of, it's really funny. So I've got young adult children now, and I think just having the conversation with, hey, it's really easy to spend money on your credit card. Just know you have to pay it back. So be very careful about how you do that. And it's how people get themselves into trouble. And so, yeah, I could go on and on and on about our national deficit, and frankly, we're seeing the fallout happening just in delinquencies with all the other stuff too, right?
Well,
So,
and that's what I was going to ask. Do you feel there's a symbiotic relationship or maybe a cause and effect with what's going on the commercial real estate and the delinquencies or kind of readjustments that are going there? Is that going to have a ripple effect in markets as well as housing in the surrounding areas?
so I've had many debates on this one,
Yeah.
and so it'll be really interesting because we definitely have issues in the commercial real estate market. However, I have to believe that there are very influential, very high powered, very wealthy people in positions where they're helping to drive decisions like all employees have to come back to the office, right? So if we see this huge call back to the office, I think it's going to help to offset some of that. Now, the debt that's incurred and the interest that's incurred and having, tenants shifting and offices downsizing over the last, you know, how many years, 6 years or so,
Yeah.
they'll have to make up for that, right? Um, but certainly our government has not been shy in that bailout. And, I guess the question is, how often, how much, and how long do we keep bailing out these huge amounts of money? And can we do it? And the only way out of that, quite frankly, it's from our pockets. And this is the part that frustrates me the most with the American people today and all people is I don't think they get that that's going to be out of their pocket at some point. So when we all want to complain about inflation, it's just so frustrating to me that they don't get that this is, an administration that just decided to jack up prices for a carton of milk. It's because we're doing all of this stuff and bailing out, all this big industry.
Well, yeah.
And at some point we have to,
Well,
we're
there's
going
no
to pay
such
the
thing as
piper.
free money, you know?
It's not free. It's never free. And so the only way I can make, a $34 trillion deficit look little is by making that dollar look smaller. And it's inflation. And no one talks about that on the news. Nobody talks about why inflation's happening. They just talk about that it's bad.
Yeah. And then, if we can get it to the 2%, then we're back to normal, but you're disregarding, like you said, that 35 to 40% increase where,
Right.
our wages haven't been commensurated with that. So you're almost pricing out even further.
Right. We want a strong GDP. We want a strong stock market. Inflation's caused strong GDP and a great stock market. What happens when we push inflation down? I mean, that's going to impact the stock market and GDP.
Well, I know we'll talk a little bit more on the out because I do want to kind of dive into a little bit of the markets because there's a story in each one. And I know and later on, we can talk a little bit more about kind of the outlook for 2025 because a lot of these
Sure.
policies like deregulation, supply chain, tariffs,
Mhm.
labor and the impact of, say, deportation or immigrant labor and its impact
Sure.
on the housing and construction. What does this mean for the buyer, the builder, and even just general inflation? But before we kind of get there,
Are we talking
let's
about?
go.
Are we talking about which one do you want to talk about? There was a couple
Oh, no,
nations.
I was gonna, sorry, that was a prelude to later. What I was
Okay,
gonna
sure.
start us off with was the markets and the different, there are some, looking at Zonda information, there's
Sure.
overperforming markets and there's underperforming markets. And, you were talking a little bit about fringe markets and those have been driving the
Sure.
success, but now there's been a shift. So, for our audience, which regions have been overperforming and what do you feel are like the factors of those success? And will it continue?
Sure. No, it's a great question. So we actually do what we call our market ranking by market. And so there's a couple of factors that are actually driving what's happening in the market. And so we have these very high priced locations, frankly, that are just challenged with, frankly, population leaving those markets, low supply, lower activity, stifled in so many different categories. And then we also have markets that just didn't recover as strongly as they should have at the very beginning when all the other markets were thriving. So it's interesting to see markets like the Midwest actually doing well. So Chicago, Columbus, Indianapolis, um, Cincinnati, Minneapolis, those are all doing fairly well right now. And then all those fringe markets that we talked about where people are moving to because they can, because employers are letting them move to those locations. So we're seeing a lot of movement to markets like, in Arizona, Tucson's doing well. Vegas is doing well as a no tax location, serving, frankly, like the California super expensive markets.
Hmm.
Florida, Texas, those markets are on fire right now. One, because we have finally all these baby boomers retiring. It's this huge population, but they're finally at this age where they're retiring. So we're seeing a huge influx into Florida as an example. And then we have, this younger generation that's just, starving for affordable housing coming out of these more expensive markets. So that's really pushing markets like Houston, Dallas, San Antonio. Austin's always been a super popular market, but the prices are so expensive there. It's performing on average because the incomes and purchase prices are a little bit out of whack. The surprises for me that aren't working really well right now, though,
Mhm.
Denver is still suffering. It just grew too fast. I mean, the prices went up way too fast. The Salt Lake market still pretty soft right now. Reno should be doing well, but it was another market that grew too fast. Um, and then markets that we expected to be more challenged are like San Francisco, San Jose, just super expensive. And with cap rates and some of that stuff where they're at, multifamily locations seem to be a little bit more challenging as well.
Do you feel, you'll, or I know we've seen it in a while, but do you feel there's going to be a continuation of a flight out of those kind of expensive markets like in California and the Northeast and going into these kind of mid markets or growing attractive markets? Or is
You know,
there
it's
just a locked in and just saying, hey, stick with what I got?
so I actually do believe that move down markets like the Florida markets are going to continue to thrive because there's so much wealth and so much equity that I think they're, running for their last location or at least their, kind of that location that gives them the time to enjoy their life with their equity and some of that stuff. So I see Florida staying pretty strong. I see Carolina staying strong, like Myrtle Beach and Charleston and some of those locations. Um, I think that there is a pause in this middle market. And if we were to talk about markets in the form of like customer groups, the entry level market has just been obliterated. It's sitting out there waiting for something. The move down and move up markets are very, very strong right now because that equity release. But
Hmm.
as soon as we see some movement there, right? I think you'll see a little bit of a stall out. The interesting thing with the move down buyer, because I've been tracking that one for a good portion of my career, once their house goes down in value by a certain percentage, they're going to be stubborn and they're going to hold out for the money they think that their, trophy house is worth, right? So we could see some stall out from there. But for the most part, it's the entry level market that I think is locked. You asked the question, will these fringe markets suffer at some point? I think we're starting to see somewhat of a concern again. that employers are going to call everybody back to the office. Amazon did themselves a favor, but I think caused a stir in the market for some of that migration that was really
Yeah.
benefiting the entire US. Um, it'll be interesting. There's a lot of CEOs talking about, should we make change here?
What's your thoughts? Do you think that trend's going to continue and there's a consolidation, or do we still have this kind of
I do
fear?
think the trend's going to continue.
Is
And I think there's a lot of discussion. I love the ability, I travel a lot for work, and I love the opportunity to work at home. But I was given this great career, and I can't imagine my career without all the mentors I've had in my life and being able to work side by side with them and all that stuff. And I do worry about this younger generation not getting that. I think they need to know what it's like, you know, to get in early and work late, work weekends in the office. I mean, there's so much that comes out of that. I think from a career perspective,
yeah.
it's valuable, right? So
Well,
my team works. So we work on Teams all day long, so we get a lot of face, interface and that kind of stuff, and it works out really great. But I still feel like I'm not giving them enough in person time. I know I'm not giving them enough in person time, and there's something to that. I think that just fulfills you a little bit more than the way we're doing it today. But I will say this: I've never had more work-life balance in my life, which is
okay.
great.
So
It's great.
and I think that seems to be the general case. And for us,
Yeah.
we take a hybrid model, which in complete agreement. You can't substitute that connectiveness. I mean, we are communal beings, and for us to be in person, to read each other's body language, to get being in kind of in a conference room and brainstorming, you don't get that kind of the juices flowing. That being in the zone with a team over a Zoom call.
It's just chemistry too, Aaron. Right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's just friendship.
Yeah.
And, I consider my work friends my second family. And that's harder to create over Zoom and some of the other things. But it's just so essential. I agree with you. We're seeing so many businesses today just push people into the office at least a couple days a week. And as long as it's, same days and you're getting that interaction, I think it's huge.
Well, to some of your points around underperforming, Denver, Salt Lake, Reno, what do you feel are some of these attributes that have led to that being underperforming or stalling?
Well, I think I said for Salt Lake and Denver and even Reno, um, those markets I think appreciated too quickly and too much. I even though on our summary we show Phoenix still as slightly overperforming. Phoenix was another one that prices just went up way too fast, and the market is correcting itself. Right. Seattle was another one. Prices. I mean, I can remember doing work in these markets and coming back, year after year after year, and in some cases going, oh my God, I mean, prices doubled in a 4-year period in some cases. And so I just think it was a fast correction. Again, we can all compliment uh, those that were in charge when rates got down to the low twos or mid twos, but it really did the economy a disservice because it's hard to climb out of that. And that really caused this huge rush and change in pricing, which we've all benefited from. But if we see rates normalize, and by the way, 8 to 10% is normal. We've seen rates as
Historically, yeah.
24%, right? And so we never want to see that again. But it's interesting to see what we have to do, I think, to really correct the market. And maybe we will get back down to 2%. Maybe that is normal. I mean, I know abroad they had negative interest rates, and there's worse than what we've experienced for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, to that point, this comes with just changing consumer behaviors and preferences, as well as the builder. I think we just the resale market. And I was looking at the data, and this may have been old, but when I looked at it a couple of weeks ago, it is more expensive square footage for a resale than a new home, which seems a bit of an anomaly. Um,
Well, and when you say it's more expensive, you're saying price per square foot, right?
Price per square foot, yes, correct.
Yeah. So there's a reason for that too. So for home builders to make deals work because prices are so ridiculous today, they're building bigger homes. And so for any consumers listening outside of our industry, the price per square foot is always greater for a smaller home. And the resale market is really serving, if there is an entry level market or there is a more affordable market, they tend to be serving a lot more, but the new home market hasn't done a great job in, and that is in those more affordable price points. So they're smaller homes, and generally speaking, the average size home today is about 2,200 square feet. The average new home market is really building in the 1,500 to 5,000 square feet, but it's just much bigger. That's why. And the new home market, without a doubt, if you go price to price, it's about 1% per year based on the age. So you can do the quick math on that. If it's 30 years older, should be 30% less. So it's
Well,
definitely less expensive, like for like.
well, I've been saying this as well as, like you were saying, the average for a new home or starter is kind of, we're conditioned at 1,500, 1,300, 1,500. We turn back to
Yeah,
Levittown's, it was 900, 1,000. You can have a three-bedroom,
right.
one bath, three-bedroom, two bath. Do you
Right.
feel it's maybe reassessing the quote starter home and look
Oh,
and
no question.
reimagine?
No question. I was just with a group of industry great friends. I've been doing this a long time, a couple nights ago. And that's exactly what I said. I said, we need to bring back the 900 square foot cottage. My favorite house on the market today, it's ridiculously expensive. It's downtown Huntington Beach. It's like 910 square feet. It's a 2 bedroom, one bath, but it is the cutest house, probably worth about $2.2 million. But obviously location is a big part of that. But,
Yeah.
but I will say for me, part of the charm and what I love about that house is it's just this really charming cottage. I'm not a big fan of, the big house on the hill. I want something that's clever and attractive and functional in space. And most of my time is spent outside the house if I'm not working. So
So having
um,
almost that kind of cottage courtyard feel going
it's,
back to, yeah,
it's
that
so
seems,
cute.
well, let's roll on to that because, that is around consumer preferences and they are changing on
Yeah.
the starter, the move up, the move down, across the board. So, what does that mean for home design, sales, marketing,
Sure.
amenities? What are you seeing as kind of impacting based on what the consumer is asking for and the changes?
It's a great question. So I would say, if I have the biggest hobby I have, it is consumer preferences. So we do a huge study throughout the country, and we're talking to new home consumers really regularly about what they want. Um, Here's the biggest challenge we have right now. Think about the last 6 years of what's happened just societally, right? So from COVID to, wars and technology going crazy and all this stuff. It's really kind of pushed us to doing so much more cocooning in our houses. And so where we used to kind of look at our house for shelter, right? Um, Today it's really kind of become even our third place, so it's become the place where we work, it's become the place where we entertain, it's become the place where we're looking for privacy and safety and all the stuff, right? And so yes, I think the reason why space is so important is because we're doing so much with that space. I think we just have to get more functional with that space, right? And we have to be, there was a lot of sort of flex space talked about, when COVID was happening and things like that. But I think we genuinely have to look at technology in the way that we live, even down to kitchens. If you looked at where IKEA or Samsung or Sony or GE, where they were predicting kitchens to go in 2025, the prediction was that kitchen could virtually disappear and expand out of, the family room space because we have all these portable appliances. Bathrooms, if you look at the average design of a home in 1950 or 1960, I mean, it was utility space. Now they're like glorious spas, which is fantastic. But when it comes down to what are the spaces you use the most, most important to the consumer is, that entry coming in. It's the family room's relationship to its outdoor space, whatever that is. It tends to be the master suite. And then, of course, you want just functional space for your kids. So, yeah, I could go on and on about that. And it does change by geography, right? So weather impacts how we design homes with things like mudrooms or basements or, bonus spaces. On the West Coast, we have a bonus room. In the Midwest, they have a basement, so it really changes. But I think the one thing we all have in common is we all want more time in our life. We all want more light in our homes, but we still want privacy. So put that together, right? And then we all want to enjoy the time in our homes with the people we care about the most. And so um, now add to that we're working at home and not just living at home. We aren't going out as much as we ever used to. We're not shopping at retail centers like we ever used to. Most of us get at least a box or two a week on our doorstep. I won't even admit how many boxes I get on a weekly basis. So there's just all these new things that have happened that we need to accommodate for, but yet it's the least affordable time ever. So again, my answer is better with space, increase light, and that makes smaller spaces always feel bigger and better. And then we just need to use technology and the use of multifunction better in our designs. And there's a lot of architects that I work with that are doing exactly that. I just worked on a community where one of the homes will be as small as 270 square feet. And I think it's going to be a huge hit because the location's phenomenal and it has all the stuff you need. And it's got this flexibility, not just in furnishings, but how you use the spaces there. The three things people want most are a guest bedroom, a master bedroom, an office. And you can make that work in 270 square feet, believe it or not. And then, of course, you got to eat. So there is a kitchen in there somewhere, too.
So based on that, do you see the trend for more new home sales is going more, I guess, less, not using the word utility or utilitarian, but more smaller and functional and maybe geared towards a smaller family unit?
I think they're trying. So I don't want to take that away from them. I think we've got some really smart, clever builders out there.
Sure.
But I do think the instinct for all product manufacturers to do what they've done well. And so I don't see that happening super fast, Aaron, unfortunately. But I do know a lot of the builders that I'm working with, again, are very smart and they're thinking about those things. I think the challenges in the home building industry, homes are the most expensive product you're gonna actually build and make. And so there's just great risk with it. So the car industry takes 7 years to actually develop, plan, and strategize and release a new model. Um, some builders are going there and really trying to kind of think through and pre-test that. But I would say the majority of builders tend to do what they've done well yesterday. But I'm hoping it does begin to change. At some point, we're going to build ourselves out of the market if we don't make change, or like has happened in the last 100 years, about anywhere from 7 to 15 years, the market corrects itself and adjusted for us. So we'll see if that happens.
Well, I know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know that it will, though, in the next 4 years, because I think the answer for this new administration is slightly different. I think it's going to probably throw more money at the cause.
And see kind of that spike in that curve and then.
Yeah, I think our deficit's going to go through the roof. More so than it's already gone.
Well, before we kind of dive into a little bit of that, you talked about buyer preferences. And you even kind of talked a little bit about the boxes in which you receive.
Yeah.
Which leads to a larger, just what we found in trends is more of a digital presence, a more educated buyer that before they even step on the lot or a model or a development, that they've been served and they've searched you, they've read material, they've done better analysis, they've gone all this stuff, and to a point to where some of them, I think it's, you guys had it with UTOR, and I forget what was the statistic, but
we have so many great tools there, Aaron. It's amazing.
Well, and that's why I think you guys are so innovative, because it's seeing the trend of, I don't want to deal with a salesperson, but let more autonomy in the decision and feeling, touch it, haptic, experiencing it, visual aids, like you were talking about 3D renderings,
Yeah.
before I even talk to a human being. Do you see that as kind of going on? And how's that kind of changed the way we market and approach? Yeah.
Oh, it's already happening. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of gone through the roof. I mean, the best part about COVID is it catapulted that whole thing, right? I mean, there were a very small number of people actually buying groceries online pre-COVID, and now it's sort of a regular deal, right? You never would have, ordered food the number of times you will order foods that are now delivered to their home, and the home buying's not any different, right? So I think the real key is with the home because it's the most expensive purchase you're ever going to make. So much of that research is done online first, right? And so the more visual you can, the more opportunity you have to get them. But it does come down to three things when you buy a home, and it's how much can I afford, who's coming with me, and then what are my choices. So they narrow a lot of that down online. And then the more and more I can wow them with these virtual tools that we have. And then on top of that, with YouTuber to be able to see a home whenever I want to, right? I mean, I can see it at 12 o'clock at night or I can see it at 10 in the morning. With the click of your phone, you have access to all these things. It's fantastic. And there's so many great tools out there. The home purchase without ever seeing it in person, that was still a pretty small number. But even that number is really changing, particularly for like investors abroad. I mean, I've had builders, sell 10 to 20 homes without ever seeing them because they, did the math and did some quick analytics and bought them.
We've seen that as well, that there's almost this kind of
Yeah.
Tesla model where I can build it all out in an online portal and then,
Yeah.
it's already in the planning and design phase and now it's just moves us down the conveyor belt.
It'll be interesting for markets like Texas, though, where, it's an 80% broker co-op. As you move around the country, it's a very different model as to how many look to that real estate consultant. I think when you're transferring into a new area and you see high migration, that broker is helping you to buy really what most home buyers are buying, which is they buy the location first, right?
Mhm.
And then the house is really the accessory. So it's nice to be able to view all the houses and things like that. But truly, if we look at what a home purchase is, it's really a location purchase. And, the accessory or the extra is, okay, now which house am I going to put on it? So they want to know things about schools and where are the hospitals and how close am I to the airport? And, are there gangs nearby? All the stuff we worry about
Yeah,
for
yeah.
our kids, right? Hmm.
Well, and to that point, that I know with the changes in kind of the real estate inside sales. I mean, how do you feel sales brokers, real estate agents? How are they going to have to change going into the future?
It's really funny. So I do a lot of speaking with those folks, and I actually think it's a huge opportunity for them. Yeah, I mean, if they embrace it, I mean, certainly could it cannibalize some of their sales activity? Yes. But if I'm good at what I do, I mean, I'd put it to work for me. I've done quite a bit of research with brokers and home builders on online, how you sell from website design to you name it. And it can really play to your favor. I think the brokers that it really begins to eliminate more than anything. It's kind of those onesie twosie brokers that are, a family member and they're attaching them to a sale or whatever. But I just think at the end of the day, it could really, and this is an unpopular thing to say too. Frankly, my boss will probably hate me for this, but I actually think it could be a huge tool. Your outreach is better. Um, your ability to really get to the right answers for your customers. And if you're good at that, people are going to come back. They're going to refer you. All those kinds of things. I think it's an opportunity to just be better at what you do. Just like it helps you and I do our job every day. And we couldn't do this without it, right?
So,
So
so from what I'm hearing, you feel it's going to kind of force that sales agent or realtor to really up their game, and almost the ones that are successful will rise to the top and benefit, and those that have just been, like I said, onesie twosies or underperformers are going to kind of.
yeah, what I'm saying is it's going to help the best be the best. And I think it's going to eliminate and I think those that don't embrace it and really don't get involved and really understand the power behind it, I think they could really fall behind quickly. And I think in anything in life, if you're threatened by something that's new and can make you better, and yet you still ignore it, why would you do that? I
Yeah.
I, I think
You're
it's
just going to go the way of the dodo bird at that point.
right.
Uh,
It's we all have to continue to transform. When I lived through the day where we were sending out memos, and then I went to email, and now it's a text and social media and all this stuff. I mean, there's just so much power in some of these new vehicles and new tools. It should make them better. I think it can be very positive. But yes, I think those tools will help consumers to do a lot independently. But because of the price point, because it's so expensive, I think the average consumer still wants that expert to make sure they're making a good decision. And in my research, it's the most important for that entry level consumer as the person who's bought 5 or 6 of them that feels much more confident and could and might be more willing to do it on their own.
hmm. Well, switching gears to on here, going more from the builder and developer standpoint, the future outlook, we touched on it before with the Trump administration on the campaign trail. It was heavily geared around deregulation, resource management, increase domestically. We also have tariffs, which again can have an impact on material and supply. We're coming down from a high of lumber. Now it's coming low, but we can anticipate more. From my superficial conversations, cocktail talk with builders and developers, they're bullish. They see this as, hey, excited, we're going. If we have to deal with tariffs, we can factor that in. What are you hearing? Do you feel the builder developer needs to adopt a different strategy going into 2025 or to prepare for some of these risks? What do you foresee?
Well, there was a lot in that question, Aaron.
There it is. So I'm gonna let you start
so I'll kind of hit them in the order of just sort of the big and basic answers, which are I think 25 is going to be a great year. We're projecting prices up at almost 4% across country. I think rates are going to come down. I don't know that they're going to measurably come down enough to make that big of a difference. So somewhere under 5, maybe in the mid 5s. I think GDP continues to be strong. I think we're going to see that increase a little bit. I do think job growth is going to slow. I do think we're going to see some impact from employers bringing employees back. And so that could have some impact. If I'm a home builder, I would be cautious about pushing too much to those fringe locations. Looking at some of the builder portfolios, I'm shocked at some of the locations they're going to. And so be careful, because those real fringe locations that the market adjusts, they're the first to go down.
I'd be remiss not to ask, what are some of those markets that you've seen on the builders list that you're thinking to yourself, oh no, why are you going in? Or that's a larger risk.
Maybe like a 6-hour podcast on that one, because it's all over the country, right? So it just depends on if we're talking about Texas, California, DC or whatever. It really, even Denver, they'll know what that means, just given the market, right? So just be careful how far you go, because those will be the first to contract. As far as tariffs go, I think that's one of the very positive things that Trump's administration did do. I appreciated the fact that, if we're paying them, some of these other countries should too. I do think that we're going to see impacts to higher costs, though, on some of these as a result of that. I think that continues. And certainly the builders are looking at that. But if we see a decline in interest rates and we see some movement in that category, I think we're going to continue to see prices rise. I think the biggest issues that we didn't talk about today isn't necessarily tariffs, and any administration, I think, in charge today is just all the requirements we're putting on builders as it relates to sustainability. The cost of all these new regulations for home building, I know certainly in California, it's put a huge amount of money on um, building those homes. At the same time, uh, you know, you have to really question where is the world going. It's much like we just talked about. Technology is a must for the realtor, and to stay out in front, you've got to stay out in the front, stay out in front on all things, doing it better. Um, but I think there's a lot of pressure there, and I think there's a lot of concern for how much that's going to cost. We're not seeing quite the return on, uh, price, I would say, for the cost. So some of that stuff I think will be interesting, but maybe this administration will squash some of that. I don't know. I think at some point again, it's a price you have to pay to move forward. But we'll see. So I don't know if I
Do you?
answered all your questions, but
No,
I'm
no, no.
pretty bullish about it.
Well, to that point about kind of those regulations, especially in California, having that kind of green technology and those requirements,
Yeah.
and then you have the Green Energy Acts and tax credits. Do you feel those aren't adequate enough to offset that initial cost, or that's not creating enough balance that maybe regulation is overdoing it?
So it's really interesting, but it's the market it's hurting the most is the market that is hurt the most, which is the entry level buyer. They're just trying to buy a home. So most of your move up or move down buyers, I mean, across the country, particularly for the Sun states, more than 50% want it and they're willing to pay for it. So I think that's positive. It's that entry level buyer that's just trying to get in, and then you throw another $15,000 in price, and they're like, I was just looking to afford a bedroom for my kid. It's that kind of stuff, right? So, um, I think at the end of the day, I'm a big fan of choice when it comes to those things. Because just like we all had to buy our first house, we've got to help these young adults afford a home first. And the onus comes to all of us as builders and designers to come up with the right product. But I think that goes to all things, when we decide what has to go in those homes and all the things that go with it. So, I'm really intrigued with some of this stuff. Um, I'm cautious to even saying this out loud, but I'm going to say it anyway. Like, when you look at Boxable, with
Hmm.
what Elon Musk has done, if we could see something like that happen in real estate construction, if you look at the floor plan that they have and what they've tried to roll out, I mean, it's a one bedroom, has guest room functionality, has an office, has a really nice kitchen in it, and it's just about 200 square feet, and it looks very livable, right? And so,
Yeah.
do we have to park it or not? Do we have to have a garage or not? Can we be more clever just with giving people their own space? I think we'd have half the homeless issues we have today, and we just have to get more clever with space. So, tariffs or not, green technology or not, all that stuff, those are really minor questions in the big scheme of things, you know?
Well, and it sounds like a little bit of public um, encouragement, and I'll speak to more of here in the Austin market with recent ordinances that passed that allowed for more density on smaller lots. Do you feel, this type of ordinances or local, uh, regulations or pushes, are those needed to be done in conjunction with rethinking building, the use of materials, things of this nature?
Oh, there's two big, I mean, again, we could do a whole podcast just on entitlement and governmental issues. I mean, in Texas, it always makes me smile because, you talk about building a home on a 2,500 square foot lot, and they're like, oh, we can't do that here. And I'm like, but you're building townhomes, and those are on smaller lots than what I'm talking about. But I want them to be detached, private, air between the homes, and they live great. They get a lot more light than a townhome would. And, the continued response I get is, we can't do that here. And I know you can. You have to change the map from, a fee simple map to a condo map and things like that. But so many of the builders are just like, no, we build 4,000 square foot lots or we build townhomes. And there's so many great solutions. And you can go to the high price markets, California, New York, Seattle, Denver, some of those areas where you can see they just had to conform or they were going to build themselves out of business. Right?
Yeah.
So, but I think the other big categories, like in California, are just the cost of fees and permits, the number of people, the multiple different jurisdictions throughout the country. Orange County has like 60 plus different jurisdictions. I think that's ridiculous.
Oof.
In Japan, the reason, you can get some of the product that they have approved is, they don't have 60 different jurisdictions all having their say on what that looks like with different rules. So you can do things like homes out of a factory and things like that. So there's so much to be thought of. If I was really running on a campaign to push things to be different and to really play up to the real estate market,
Yeah.
I would talk about consolidating approvals. I mean, the number of governments we have that gets to decide what the house looks like in these microclimates throughout counties, let alone states, is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And they all get to have a different say. And you know, I like the fact that we have the United States and you can do things different by state. But then we've got MSAs and counties and all these microclimates it's just too much red tape.
Well,
Too
and
much.
it's just well, and it's frustrating, I would assume, for developers and builders because it's, well, why do I go to a new market and have to learn a new process? Why don't I just continue with what I know?
Well, and just to give an example, I mean, I can build a house in Texas and my fees and permits could be anywhere from $7,000 to $30,000. In California, it's, $140,000 for the exact same process. You know, of course the houses are more expensive. It's ridiculous. It's the exact same process. Why is it so much more expensive? And why are the rules so different all over? It just doesn't make sense. That's really what causes, I think, challenges and cost and different home designs and builders.
Well, we just don't have that standard.
Yeah. And yet at the same time, when we look at families and their needs, they aren't that different. They really aren't in Texas versus California versus, North Dakota. So there's better ways to do things for sure.
Well, do you see any other significant shifts when it comes to industry professionals that maybe we should prepare now for 2025?
I think the big thing, not just for 2025, but probably the next decade, is just the influx of new talent and the need for new talent, I think, in our industry. When we went through the Great Recession, I would say from 2006 to 2012, we lost this really great population of young adults, right? And so there's a lot of disparity, I think, in talent there, and it'll be interesting. And so anybody listening today who's interested in coming into this industry, again, I feel like I get paid to do my hobby. Reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. But we really need new talent, and so and it's a great business to be in, as you know. So
Well, you got ahead of my show notes because that's going to be my closing is, there is that young need for young professionals, not only in the trades, but just across all the multifacets that are within our wonderful industry. What
yeah,
advice would you give these young professionals that are just starting off or looking to kind of shift careers?
it's a really funny thing. But if you look at the most popular channels on TV, the very first one's the news, and the second one is home shows. Like, who doesn't love to talk about like home design and
Yeah.
building homes and where you live? And we all have one thing in common, or at least that's my hope for every person who lives in our United States, is we all have a home, right? And so it's such a popular subject. It's so interesting, and you know I can't think of a better industry to be a part of. So figure out what part you want to play in it and join us. We'd love to hear from you.
You're never short of stories or interconnectedness. I mean, just even take through the week of the last few weeks with what's going on. There's such an impact on the macro and micro scale. It's amazing, and how it affects all
It
of us
is
too.
crazy. Yes.
Yep. Food, water, shelter. Those are the three that we're all connected by. Without those, we don't, we're not living.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And that's our hope for everyone. On that final note, I'd love to do a plug. So I also do a podcast. It's
Please.
Inspirational Leadership. The last podcast I did was with Scott Larson. He's the CEO of Homemade. We have over 600,000 people across America last year that didn't have a roof over their head at least one night a week. And it's devastating. And when you look at just housing and affordability. And for the very low income, I think it's 72%. I think that's the number that spends over half of what they make on housing. And so listen to the podcast. And first of all, because Scott's like fantastic. He's a just remarkable human being. He's also a 3-time cancer survivor as of, I think, this July. So he's, you know,
Wonderful.
achieved so many great things. But more than anything, he's trying to conquer, I think, one of our biggest issues across the US. And even just a $10 donation, I'm not plugging even for donations, but just get involved. If you don't have
Sure.
money, everyone's got time. Try to invest some time and make a difference. Spread the word. Do what you can. But we have a
Well,
we have
and
big
for those that are interested,
yeah.
homemade.
It's homemade. Yeah, it's fantastic. Go to homemade.org online, but it's just they're such a great organization. Scott's such a wonderful human being, and I do a series on inspirational leadership. I don't focus on really market stuff and things like that. You do such a great job of that, Aaron. And so many others do. The focus is like, how did you start your career? Where did you come from? How did you grow that career? And how the heck did you become CEO of, said industry? And for his, it's homemade. And he's got a great journey to talk about. He's brilliant. I've done most of the CEOs in the industry, from home builders to developers too. And so it's neat just to hear their story, just on how they made it to success. So it's been a fun series for me to do.
No. Mollie, I appreciate you being on the other side of the table and sharing your story with us today. So thank you.
Sure. No, it's such a pleasure, Aaron. I really appreciate it. And I know how hard these are. So thanks for doing it.
No, when you have
Here in my living room in my own
a
home.
knowledgeable expert that has a huge passion and thirst, there's no work involved.
This is great. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
And for those that are listening, thank you again for spending the time, and we'll catch you next time on the Market Pulse. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.